Welcome to Mums Get Fit Retreat, how to get your body back and feel sexy again after kids. This is a free online event specifically for the busy mum who wants to lose weight, tone up, and feel confident in herself and her body by eating better, working out, and working on her mindset. I am your host today, Jessica Marie, and today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Dr. Venus Ramos. Is that correct?
Yes, Dr. Venus Ramos.
Yep. And Dr. Venus is the biohacking MD. She's a board certified physician in the specialty of physical medicine and rehabilitation. She has a thriving medical practice in Southern California and has competed for 20 years as a national level fitness athlete. A respected fitness trainer, she has clients ranging from single mums to professional athletes and even movie stars. She's a repeat guest on the TV series The Doctors and American Gladiators, and she also contributes to multiple health outlets, including iHerb and Oxygen Magazine. So welcome, Venus.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
You're so welcome, and I'm just so happy to have you here. So Venus, tell me a bit about your journey, where you started and why you do what you do.
Well, I cannot even remember a time that I did not want to be a physician. I've always wanted to be a doctor. I think I have this memory. I believe it's a memory, but it's a very clear picture of when I was in preschool. I fell down on a playground. Someone slapped a Band-Aid on my knee and boom, I wanted to be a doctor. That's the image that's in my head, but that basically tells you how long I really wanted to be a doctor. But beyond that, entering medical school and choosing my specialty, I really felt like I wanted to do something to help restore people's function. That was very important to me. What seemed something that really appealed to me was the thought of being an athlete and helping people get over their injuries, get back out on the field, get back out on the court, playing their sport. That's something that really appealed to me a lot. I think it came from the development that I had around the same time of starting in fitness competitions and really getting into the competitive fitness world. So that was something that kind of really appealed to me. And then I realized as I went into practice as a physician that not only did I want to help restore people's function when they were injured or disabled in any way, but I wanted to do what I could to help prevent that. And being a fitness competitor and having that fitness background, working on more of the preventative side made a lot of sense to me. So that's when I began to develop a lot of programs in terms of health coaching and thinking even more holistically and doing what I could to prevent people from eventually needing my services as a rehab doctor, perhaps those who might come to me after a stroke or things of that sort.
That's so impressive, Venus, that you've been doing those fitness comps for 20 years. You must be really disciplined.
Well, it definitely did take a lot of discipline to figure out how to fit in the training diet and the training regimen, along with initially medical school, because that's when I started, and then later with my medical practice.
Very good. So today we're going to talk a little bit about cortisol. I know you love this topic.
Yes, I think it's really important because no matter what you do or no matter what means you take in terms of whether it's primarily a focus on diet or focus on workouts and your exercise regimen, knowing what cortisol does to your body and having an understanding of that is going to have a huge impact on you achieving real results and success with whatever route that you choose.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. So what is cortisol and why is it needed in our bodies?
Well, cortisol, many people are familiar with it as being a hormone associated with stress. It's very well known as the stress hormone. And even more so, people know about the response to cortisol, and that's the flight or fight response. So cortisol, when it evolved in humans in terms of the human response to any kind of stress, it was initially the stress of an attacker, maybe a savage beast that was going to come after humans when they first evolved. And in order to survive, humans needed to either fight off that attacker or they needed to flee. They needed to run away. So what are the things that are needed if you're either going to fight or run? Basically, you need your muscles to be well fed and well nourished and given plenty of oxygen so that you can either run or physically fight. You need your blood pressure to tighten up in terms of the blood vessels directing the blood into the muscles and directing it into the brain. So you would have an increase in your blood pressure, increasing your heart rate to really get that blood pumping where it's needed. These are the responses, the physiologic responses that happen so that you can survive as a human if you are being attacked. Now, thousands of years later, humans have, and perhaps we're not all undergoing the stress of an attacker on a regular basis. This isn't something that we necessarily have to do. Hopefully, many of us don't have attackers on a regular basis, but we still have stresses that our body is responding to. We may have the stress of a busy work schedule, or we may have the stress of a daily commute to and from work, or we may have, unfortunately, stresses of arguments within the family. Any type of a stress, you're still going to get the same response. The human body is still responding with that spike in cortisol, which also brings on the tightened blood pressure, the elevated heart rate, all of those physiologic responses that happen with that elevated cortisol. And unfortunately, a lot of adverse effects can occur because we're not necessarily using up all of that elevated blood pressure, heart rate. We're not using those physiological responses to do the running away or the fighting. And now our body is left with these responses to deal with.
So what can happen to the body when it is stuck in these responses all the time?
Well, again, as I mentioned, it is a normal physiologic response. Cortisol is necessary. It's actually something that we need still, even though we may not be having physical attackers or savage beasts attacking us. Cortisol is still necessary in our bodies because it's needed for healing wounds, fighting off infections, things of that sort. So yes, cortisol is still a very necessary hormone in our body. However, when you're not using up all of those physiologic responses, when you're not fighting something off or running away, cortisol can go unchecked. And when you're always suffering from stresses and you're not managing that stress adequately, that high cortisol level remains. And chronically, it can start to do things like interfere with your memory. It affects a portion of your brain in the hippocampus. And this part of your brain is actually responsible for encoding memories. So things like walking into a room and forgetting why you walked into the room, or placing your keys and figuring out, oh no, I left them in the refrigerator, things like that. When you have memory issues like this, oftentimes it can be related to cortisol level that went unchecked. You may have some effect on your mood, depressed mood or feelings of anxiety. That can occur when you have elevated cortisol levels. Of course, as I mentioned, the physiologic responses that happen, the higher blood pressure, the elevated heart rate, you may start to develop some actual disorders, hypertension, high blood pressure disorders, heart conditions. You can develop that when cortisol stays high on a chronic basis. You may start to have an issue with frequent infections or coming down with colds often. So you might have a weakened immune system. I did mention that cortisol is actually an important part of healing wounds and an important part of our immune system. But again, when you have an elevated cortisol level for too long, then that actually leads to a weakened immune system. Another very key thing, especially when it comes to our health goals of maintaining an ideal weight or achieving some sort of fat loss or weight loss, cortisol can cause you to crave fats and sweets, things of that sort. So that can be actually very difficult to manage your health goals when you're craving these things. And cortisol actually has an inverse relationship. So it goes up when insulin levels go down. So that's usually what you see. When you have higher cortisol levels, you'll see decreased insulin levels. So with this effect on your hormonal response of insulin, insulin is responsible for your blood sugar management. So it's actually taking your blood sugar and putting it into your body cells. So again, cortisol left unchecked can lead to some issues with your insulin, and insulin is very much related. Insulin resistance is related to the development of diabetes. Again, very difficult in terms of maintaining your health goals and reaching any goals you have in terms of weight loss when you are starting to develop some insulin resistance.
Yes, absolutely. It's very, very interesting, everything that you've just said. So, are there any simple solutions to keep our stress in check and our cortisol levels in check as well? And
absolutely. I mean, the number of adverse effects, basically they extend throughout our whole body, as I just mentioned. There are even a few I didn't even get around to in terms of the effect on the libido.
Yes,
but we can come back to that one especially. But all of these things, we can do something about them, even though we feel like we are way too busy, way too stressed out. I don't have time to manage all this. You don't have to dedicate a whole hour in a yoga class to manage your stress levels. It's not going to take that. And that's the biggest thing, because I think all too often we think that we don't even have time to manage our stress because we're so busy. And then you're in this little catch-22 situation where you can't seem to figure out what to do to get out of this stressful situation.
Viral.
The key is just to take a breath. That is it's actually the key to figuring this whole thing out, because you are breathing anyway. So all you have to do is make a change in how you're breathing, and you can actually start to achieve a decrease in your cortisol levels. So what I mean by this is just take some time, anytime during your day, to just change your breath. Take some deep breaths. If you're able to, think about, go one step further beyond just taking a few deep breaths. Try the 4-7-8 breath. This was a breath first described by Dr. Andrew Weil. He took it from yoga breathing.
Yep.
And essentially, all you have to do is think about an inhalation for 4 counts, holding your breath for 7 counts, and then exhaling, breathing out for another 8 counts. So just keep this type of breathing, a few cycles of this, and you will actually start to see a decrease in your cortisol levels. You'll start to achieve a relaxation in your body. Even after, I've seen it after about 4 cycles, you'll start to see some real relaxation in your body. And all it took was just a change in how you are breathing. It has a lot to do with the fact that your inhale is associated with the sympathetic nervous system and your exhale is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. Again, some technical words, but basically just think of the parasympathetic nervous system as your rest and digest part of your nervous system. So if you want to rest more, you're just going to spend more time in exhalation versus inhalation.
I am familiar with those terms, and yes, that's a really great actionable step that some of the mums perhaps watching this right now could definitely do, very easily incorporate it into their life.
So that's one step.
Yep, that's one step. How many more steps are there?
Well, there's certainly a lot more that you could think about doing, but essentially knowing that you can just turn to breathing, that's one easy, simple little thing. The other thing, which is actually very easy to figure out after we've now gone into this discussion of what is cortisol, is to actually use those physiologic responses, actually use up that elevated heart rate, that higher blood pressure, so that your body benefits from it. And that means do some physical activity. Okay, we don't need to fight off an attacker or run away from someone that is trying to eat us, but we can go for a jog, or even just a walk after lunch on our lunch break. Those are things that you can do, staying physically active, to help keep your cortisol levels in check.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I wanted to ask you though, what is the relationship between cortisol and too much exercise and then adding low-calorie diets on top of it?
Well, this is actually
complicated.
It gets a little bit complicated, but it's very, very simple in terms of what you think you are actually doing to your body. If you think about the really low calorie diets and really strenuous workouts, those are in itself hugely stressful to the body in terms of what you are making your body go through. So if you're putting one huge stress on top of your body, on top of the cortisol reaction, you're going to have even more deleterious effects on your health. So certainly it's not a wise thing. But here's another thing to think about. Even if you're not going to go that far, even if you're not going to go so far as to be on a super stringent diet that's super restrictive of your calories, and even if you're not going to go so far as to do hours and hours and hours of cardio, if you're just stressed out about sticking to the diet, even if it's a very sensible, plenty of calorie diet to sustain you, if you're stressed out to make sure that you get those 3 ounces of chicken just right, and oh no, I told myself I was supposed to eat at noon today and not a second after, or oh no, I have to find this particular brand of oatmeal. I don't know what kind of restrictions you may be putting on yourself. If you just stress out about that in itself is going to basically cause you to backtrack on achieving your goals. Essentially, you are fighting yourself on what you're trying to achieve, because that will keep your cortisol elevated. And even though you may be sticking to your diet to a T, even though you may be doing the perfect amount of exercise, you're so stressed out about it that you're not really going to be achieving your goals, because that cortisol level is going to keep your body from actually mobilizing the way it's supposed to and working the way it's supposed to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
So what you're saying is to really try and be conscious of stress in general, so that if you can try and manage your stress, then you're likely to have much better results, especially when it comes to weight loss and body transformation and that sort of thing.
Absolutely, because cortisol in itself is a hormone. And I already described all the many different effects that this particular hormone can have on your body. But even if you just take the one effect that it has on your insulin, that's huge in terms of what it can do and how it can affect your results in achieving weight loss.
Absolutely. So true, and so much insight there. Thank you. Let's go back to the hormones though. And what does cortisol do to our hormones and perhaps also our libido as well?
Well, if you think about cortisol, as I explained, it is indeed a hormone, and it is actually produced or created from a base hormone. There's a base hormone in our body. It's called pregnenolone. And in order to create cortisol, you need pregnenolone as a base ingredient, let's say.
Yep.
Now, if you are so stressed out and your body's constantly having to produce cortisol, you're taking away pregnenolone and creating cortisol. Now, pregnenolone is also used as a base hormone to create progesterone. Now, if you are creating so much cortisol that the pregnenolone is basically used up and doesn't make as much progesterone, you're now causing an imbalance in your sex hormones. So anytime that happens, then you can have issues in terms of your libido or in terms of your fertility, or if you're a woman, some issues in terms of menstrual symptoms that you may be experiencing. You can start to really have some adverse effects in this area because of an imbalance in your sex hormones.
So really cortisol really plays a big role in all of this then.
Absolutely. This example of cortisol with pregnenolone and progesterone is just one example. But because it is a hormone that has so many other effects on other hormonal pathways and processes, it can affect your health in so many different ways. I already mentioned the effect that it has in terms of the insulin hormone, and then there are other hormonal pathways that it also affects.
So really just rushing around day to day in a really frenzied state, like that in itself could be raising cortisol levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another hormonal pathway that it does affect is your thyroid hormone. And of course, that's something that we all may be very familiar with, thyroid being very, very closely associated with your metabolism. Oftentimes people think about if you are hypothyroid, perhaps your metabolism is not really using up those calories, and perhaps your metabolism is actually slowing down.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So is there sort of a way that somebody who's watching here today could perhaps be able to prompt themselves if they're to know when their cortisol levels are really high? Is there something that they could?
So there are different tests that are available. Sometimes the actual reliability of those tests may differ, depends on the different types of tests. Certainly see your healthcare provider, your physician, if you're concerned about it. But there are certain signals or signs that perhaps you need to take a closer look at how you're managing your stress if you are starting to notice a lot of these things. And that's simply just going down the checklist of the various adverse effects that I already pointed out. Are you starting to have some memory issues? Are you having some cravings? Are you experiencing some difficulty with sleep? Are you starting to notice a little bit more difficulty losing weight? Are you having some libido problems? All of these things that I mentioned as adverse effects, if you're starting to see a lot of these start to pick up, maybe that's a sign that you really need to take a closer look at how you're managing your stress.
I love it. Thank you so much for everything that we've discovered here today. It's been very informative. And would you like to share with me a bit about your special free gift that you have?
Oh, absolutely. Again, going along with the theme
Yeah.
that we are all very, very busy people, and sometimes that can lead to a lot of stress. I certainly don't want to create any more stress for you. So I have this 15-minute Better Body Blueprint, which is basically going to show you how to live a healthy lifestyle, how to actually make sure you're implementing a good fitness plan into your life without taking a lot of time away from your schedule. It's only going to take an extra 15 minutes of your day in order to accomplish these steps and find your way to a healthier lifestyle.
It's completely achievable, right? 15 minutes.
Absolutely. 15 minutes. That's all I'm asking for you.
Well, thank you so much for your time here today, Venus. And I will be sure to put that link just below this video so that everyone watching today can access that.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure to be able to offer it to your audience.
And thank you, girls, so much for watching here today. And be sure to stay tuned for tomorrow's interview coming up. And we'll see you then.